retour parmi nous and welcome back. Our first set of concurrent sessions focuses on how COVID-19 has impacted various sectors and how we can work together to support recovery. The tourism industry is stronger together. Merci de nous joindre à nous pour cette séance de débriefage sectoriel. Nous sommes heureux de présenter cet ensemble de séances simultanées qui mettront l'accent sur les répercussions de la COVID-19 sur chaque secteur ainsi que sur la façon dont nous pouvons travailler ensemble pour soutenir la relance. We are very grateful to the Toronto Star for sponsoring these sector debriefs. Bonne séance, and I'll see you again at 12:45.
As a nation, we almost define ourselves through the power of sport. It's part of our DNA, it's in our blood. We're polite, but we're fierce competitors. Having competed in thousands of arenas around the world, there is no place like Canada.
Canada is known for putting on amazing events. Every event we do in Canada comes with the passion of our volunteers behind it. We have the plans, we have the people, and most of all, we have the passion to deliver on the best experiences for competitions anywhere.
I think in the Olympics in Vancouver 2010, Canada showed the world really what it has to offer.
From the Pan Am and Para-Pan Am Games and the Women's FIFA World Cup, we have created that environment for sport that's second to none.
Les événements qu'on soit en ville, ça fait tellement une grande différence dans le chiffre d'affaires, dans l'achalandage, dans le nombre d'employés qu'on engage.
You will have an experience of a lifetime.
Athletes love coming here beyond the scope of competition. There are always so many places to go and see, whether it's skiing in Whistler or checking out the sites in Halifax.
If you're thinking of bringing your event here, our people will welcome you with open arms. You'll not find a better place, where everybody is just so happy to welcome you.
Guaranteed success, that's Canada.
Hello everyone, my name is Rick Traer. I'm the CEO of Sport Tourism Canada, and thanks for joining us today. A couple of housekeeping items before we get started. Everyone's microphone is on mute. However, please use the chat button to ask any questions, and we'll try to get to answer as many of those as possible, either through the presentation or at the end. And a copy of the presentation will be posted on the TIAC website in the days following the conference. As many of you will recall, we canceled Sport Events Congress 2020 in Edmonton 11 days before the event last March, with over a record 425 delegates already registered. Thousands of sport events that make up the $6.8 billion sport tourism industry have since been postponed or canceled outright, affecting hundreds of thousands of people and challenging the sustainability of many organizations and companies in the sport event supply chain. Over the past several months, we've conducted a total of 13 webinars on a variety of COVID-19 related topics to assist the industry to navigate the crushing effects of the pandemic. In May, we launched a 24-person recovery task force representing sport tourism stakeholders across Canada. The task force met weekly as a group, along with weekly meetings of each of the 4 subgroups that were formed to address specific areas related to the recovery process. Grant MacDonald, Sport Tourism Canada's head of consulting services, led the activities of the task force over the past several months. A copy of the full report and executive summary was circulated widely on October 22nd and is available on our website. Now it's over to you, Grant, for an overview of the process and the results.
Thanks very much, Rick. And it's great to be with everybody today. Also, I would like to thank TIAC for their ongoing support of sport tourism in Canada. Partnerships like this are instrumental to our future success so that we can ensure that sport hosting returns strong in every province and territory in Canada and in every community of all sizes across the nation. The Bouncing Back Recovery Task Force that was brought together in the summer, or in the late spring, I should say, we wanted to make sure that we were representative of several groups and constituencies that represented Canada. This was inclusive of Aboriginal sport, cities and provinces, destination organizations, including destination marketing, as well as destination management organizations, rights holders, national sport, multi-sport organizations, as well as university and professional sport. We also had representation from venues who are the gathering places in our communities across Canada, from hotels, and from the entire supply chain that included leaders in strategy, research, as well as other segments of sport tourism. Where we've been and what we've been doing in the days and weeks following the declaration of COVID-19 as a global pandemic, it became clear that many postponements and cancellations were going to happen. But it was more than just a running ticker of those postponements and cancellations. What that represented was a loss of business in our communities, a loss of jobs that impacted several sectors well beyond just the tourism sector. It impacted our communities and it impacted the social well-being of our communities. What we had identified in those days early in the pandemic was that we needed to capture and tell the sport tourism and sport hosting stories so that we could educate, inform, and identify the real problems that were impacting this industry in Canada and in fact globally. So what we've been doing since then is that our initial findings from what we had heard early on from our membership as well as others in the sport hosting space was that there was a significant and very real loss of revenue. That loss of revenue was in 2020, but well beyond, because some of our host cities are fueled by the destination marketing funds, municipal accommodation taxes, hotel levies, and other forms that it can take in order to fuel the investment that will see the future bidding and attraction of sport hosting. We also saw that public policy to support sport event attraction and hosting, while very well developed in some jurisdictions, was not universal. So we needed to take a look at public policy to support through the recovery, as well as what the future of sport hosting in Canada looks like. We needed reliable data and information from Canada and around the world, and we needed to reimagine the place for sport hosting and sport tourism in local, provincial, and national settings. What we have learned so far is that, like Canada, any recovery for sport hosting needs to be scalable and adaptable to the local situation and evolution of the virus. It's been mentioned in other sessions already that there are different approaches to limiting travel or not in different parts of Canada. So we needed to make sure that what we had developed as a task force could be scalable and could be adaptable to ensure that it was usable by local, provincial, and national stakeholders. But more than anything, we found that sport hosting and sport tourism needs to find its collective voice. And that voice needs to include everybody from all segments, from all levels, and from all backgrounds to ensure that it is truly representative and able to not just recover, but be reimagined for the future. Who we're working with, I mentioned our thanks for the ongoing partnership with TIAC and other organizations to support the recovery. We do know that we have found out with the collaboration that has happened since the onset of the pandemic that the tourism sector is much stronger together. We need TIAC, but we also think that we bring a lot of strength to the table as well. And Sport Tourism Canada supports the ongoing work of TIAC in helping to the tourism sector to manage and recover from this circumstance. But we also know that we, Sport Tourism in Canada, have the opportunity to align from the local to provincial to national levels in sport, in tourism, in economic development, amongst venues and recreation facilities, hotels, and a supply chain that extends well beyond just the hosting of each individual event. So what are the next steps? The task force completed its work in September. We are now undertaking a very aggressive research project in collaboration with Destination Canada in order to identify several key items. Number one is we want to assess what the domestic and international rights holder capacity is to return to hosting when the time is right and when it's safe to do so. We need to assess consumer travel and attendance intentions. We know that these have been done in many circumstances, but we want to dig deeper to find out how sport tourism can be a catalyst to maybe influence public confidence to travel again, but also to attend events. We're going to be developing a sport tourism health index that will be a snapshot in time that will identify what the health of sport hosting is in Canada and where it may need to go in order to address some of those gaps. And as I've mentioned a couple of times already, we need to be more proactive in telling the sport tourism story. It has very real value and impacts to our communities, to our businesses, to our families. It can play a role in recovery if we work proactively and we work collaboratively together. It can influence social development, and ultimately we need to find a way to have a sustainable funding framework in Canada for sport hosting that doesn't put the burden on volunteer organizations across this country who at this stage are struggling to survive themselves. And we need to find a way for sport hosting, bidding and hosting to return safely, but also return in a sustainable way. The work of the task force helped us to get sport tourism to the starting line. The challenge that we all face right now is that we don't know where the finish line is. Pace is going to be a key for us so that we can complete the race and do so with enough strength to run through the tape. We can't go out at a full sprint and not be able to sustain that and finish the race. We also have to be adaptable to be able to modify that pace depending upon what the outside influences are. So we developed the bouncing back strategy. It is guidelines for a reimagined sport hosting system. It is intended to be a guide and resource for stakeholders at all levels of the system, whether they be at the local level, provincial, or national level. Bouncing back is not a step-by-step set of instructions that will magically solve all of our problems in sport tourism. We know today is very different from what we know today is very different from what the task force knew throughout the summer months. And the work and adaptation will need to continue until we reach a degree of widespread immunity and restored confidence to travel and attend sporting events in the future. Throughout this, we have identified ways for host cities as well as sport organizations to develop a more consistent and repeatable roadmap for both bidding and hosting. No longer can we take for granted that other organizations are going to do the work for us. There is a lot of heavy lifting involved in attracting and hosting successful events, and we want to ensure that we're contributing to Canada's competitiveness. Canada hosts great events, as you saw in the Power of Sport video off the top, but we need to make sure that we deliver on those expectations. The world is looking to us as a safe sport host nation, and we can extend those same practices and principles to the provincial and local levels so that it can be more systematic, it can be repeatable, and it can lead to planned legacies. Ultimately, we want to make sure that we're sharing the burden of bidding and hosting, but ultimately increasing Canada's competitiveness globally, but also increasing the competitiveness of our cities and provinces and territories to be able to attract and host events that extend well beyond the field of play and are able to showcase the cultures, the visitor offerings that we have, and the experiences that Canada has to offer. So how do we do this? We need to get everybody on the bus with us, and we need to do so in a very proactive and strategic way. Sport tourism has not been widely understood as an industry segment over its 20 years. We sit at a unique intersection for many organizations in tourism and beyond. Sport hosting is well understood at the community level, as it has been the lifeblood for sustainable local and provincial sport organization funding. They depend on those revenues in order to exist. And without those revenues, we need to make sure that we support them so that they can return stronger. Sport tourism has more recognition among tourism, marketing, and economic development organizations. Our challenge is to look beyond just the photo ops of winning bids or ceremonies during events and understand the depth of the impacts of the sport hosting system in Canada. Ultimately, we need to do better. How do we do that? We need to get the right groups around the table, whether we are at the local, provincial, or national level. And we do know that people will start traveling closer to home before they travel from greater distance. So we need to make sure that we're getting all of the right individuals, organizations, agencies around that table to ensure that we're all headed in the same direction. We can't do it alone, and we're certainly not going to be successful or increase the competitiveness of our cities, our businesses, and our provinces and territories if we don't work together. So what are some of the impacts of sport hosting? Everybody knows the economic, which are generated through visitation, the development of our destination brands, hotel stays, gross domestic product, taxes, and jobs. But what is less well understood are some of the social and sustainability impacts of sport. On the social side, we are developing sport in Canada as well. We are also giving volunteers the opportunity to engage in their community, and we're helping communities to establish a pride of place that they can feel good about through the hosting of sport events. And it is also about social inclusion. It's a way for us to engage non-traditional communities, new Canadians, or underrepresented groups. On the sustainability side, it is about the environmental, but it goes well beyond that. It's about the development of local leadership and increasing that knowledge capacity. It's about ensuring that our venues are well used and can be financially sustainable and not drains on the public purse in all of our cities, towns, and villages. It's about logistics, ensuring that we're working with good suppliers of goods and services closer to home. It's about legacy, ensuring that we can leave our communities better post-event than they were pre-event. And it is about the environment. And sport hosting gives us a powerful platform in order to tell that message to a much wider audience. But there is more to the story. Sport can be an accelerator to the recovery. Our challenge is that we're paving the runway while we're trying to take off at the same time. And that is going to have a few bumps for sure. We want to make sure that we can give people confidence so that they can travel safely and attend our events in communities across the country. We want them to be able to make their travel decisions based on good information, best practice in terms of safety of participants, as well as safety of fans and spectators. But we want to ensure that we can give people the tools to plan effectively for those events so that they can deliver a reimagined fan experience. From past impacts to the global travel industry, we do know that sport tourism can be a stabilizing force, whether it was 9/11, SARS, the increase of passport requirements, or the global economic downturn. Sport tourism was able to be that constant, and people were able to choose attending a sporting event before even some of their leisure and business travel. Ultimately, we want to bring Canadians back together again, but we want to do it safely. And in order to do that, we need to restore public confidence to attend events in person and reimagine what that fan experience can look like to give people that confidence. Sport events can help support the development of health and wellness in our communities. This is both individual health and wellness as well as community health and wellness. And sport events can play a strong role in that. We've talked a lot about collaboration and partnership, and that will be a theme throughout the TIAC conference. And we've been working hard with Destination Canada, as I mentioned earlier. We are going to be releasing shortly the most comprehensive research study in the history of Sport Tourism Canada. And we urge everybody who receives this to fill it out. We know that there's survey fatigue out there, but we also know that there is a gap in information and good data when it comes to sport tourism, and specifically bidding and hosting. We want to make sure that the entire industry is supported, so we would encourage everybody to complete that when you receive that in the coming weeks. We've also been working with Sport for Life in order to ensure that community sport is sustainable. As I mentioned earlier, sport events are the lifeblood of many of those community sport organizations. In August, with Sport for Life, Sport Tourism Canada submitted a pre-budget submission to the Federal Finance Committee requesting a two-pronged investment approach. $250 million for local sport organization recovery fund to be made available to the 30,000 plus nonprofit community sport organizations. As well, we had called for a $100 million fund for a community sport event recovery fund to support local sport tourism as an economic driver and community leader in entrenching public safety protocols in sport hosting events in Canada. We need to get from strategy to action, and we need to try to get to that finish line with good planning and good practice. We want to make sure that we're not the guy in the race that does the face plant. So what can you do? Right now, you can do an assessment. You can reach out to your community sport organizations. You can reach out to that entire supply chain that includes venues, that includes hotels, ground transportation, airports and airlines. All of those are keys to the return of sport events, because ultimately it's going to take capacity in order to support the weight of any sport hosting projects that take place during recovery. So you can reach out and assess, engage with those groups, make sure that you communicate and you're telling those sport tourism and sport hosting stories to all levels of government. And then ultimately, we need to have a good plan of action. I would encourage everybody to go to sporttourismcanada.com. The Bouncing Back Recovery Task Force has developed a significant reference library that includes several tools and resources. One of the tools that I will call people's attention to is a risk mitigation tool that will help communities, provincial organizations, national organizations to identify all the potential risks for their sport event and help them to understand if it will meet with public health guidelines so that they can manage that risk effectively. This mitigation tool was built on a tool by Canada Soccer, which was derived from the WHO model. So I would encourage everybody to go to sporttourismcanada.com. There's a significant amount of information, and that will continue to be updated over the coming weeks and months. Lastly, we'd like for people to reach out to us, whether it's on social media or direct via email. I would encourage everybody to connect with us, because we would like to hear from you and understand what some of your challenges are. But ultimately, when you hear from us that that we're reaching out to get input on our sector-wide survey, we would encourage everybody to participate in that process. With that, I will open it up. If there are any questions in the chat, we may be able to deal with one or two of those. And I thank everybody for their time and attention. I thank you for your interest in sport tourism. And I would encourage you to connect with Sport Tourism Canada should we be able to work together today or in the future. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Grant. One question. Can you expand on the elements of the survey that is underway with Destination Canada in terms of what those elements might be and at what level? Is it local, provincial, national, international?
It is all of those. We're attempting to connect with local, provincial, territorial, and national organizations, and there will be some sector-specific questioning that is asked. So ultimately, we want to find out from you within your sector what some of those impacts have been, but also what some of those opportunities might be to assist in the recovery. Having that information based on your individual segment will give us data that we haven't previously had in sport tourism in Canada. So there is a possibility that groups or individuals may receive the survey more than once. We apologize in advance for that, but we are working with Destination, in partnership with Destination Canada, but also in collaboration with Sport for Life, as well as other groups and organizations, to try to get it spread as widely as we can, so that we can understand what the full impacts have been to sport tourism in Canada.
And what about the timelines on that research project?
It will be, the survey will be released in the coming days. I would say within a week to 10 days. And then at that point, we will leave it in market for a brief period. We do, as I mentioned earlier, know that there is survey fatigue, and we don't want to be continually reaching out to people to remind them to complete the survey.
Okay. What do you consider to be the priority next steps, Grant, in this process?
Priority next step is to get everybody involved. We need to get everybody on the bus. Many people don't think of themselves as being part of the sport tourism industry in Canada. But if you're at the local level, provincial, territorial, national level, if you're a hotelier, if you're a venue, then we need to get better at bringing everybody onto that bus with us, so that we can start informing, educating about the value and impacts of sport hosting. And ultimately, we need to be able to tell that story more consistently to all levels of government, as well as all business segments in the industry.
Very good. There are no other questions that I can see.
And I think that is our time.
Very good.
Thank you again, everybody. And we look forward to seeing you on the field of play in the not too distant future.
Merci de votre participation. Thank you for joining us. The TIAC Tourism Congress is brought to you in part by our amazing sponsors and virtual exhibitors. Please take some time to visit them at our virtual marketplace.